I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is episode 9 of my series on the JFK assassination. An interesting question arises. Why was Lyndon Johnson so determined to get the autopsy on President Kennedy's body into the hands of the U.S. military? You'll recall that team of Secret Service agents told Dr. Earl Rose, the medical examiner there at Dallas Parkland Hospital, that under no circumstances were they going to permit him to conduct an autopsy. They said they were operating under orders. And when Rose objected, they pulled their coats back, brandished their guns, and implicitly threatened to kill anybody who got in their way. They started screaming and yelling, using profanities, and they forced their way out of the hospital with the president's body. They proceed to Dallas Love Field, where Johnson's waiting for it patiently. He has seats being removed from the back of the plane. It's loaded onto the plane. They proceed on to Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C. Now, Johnson always said, well, I was just trying to be chivalrous to Mrs. Kennedy. I didn't want to leave her back in this foreign land called Texas, even though that's his home state. But when he lands at Andrews Air Force Base, notice that he does not summon the local medical examiner. Instead, he turns the body over to the military. Now, at the time, hardly anyone considered this abnormal. I mean, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, had already come to play such a dominant role in American life that people sort of just considered this normal. But keep in mind that we're supposed to be a civilian country. We were not at war. The president wasn't killed on the field of battle, like the kings of the Middle Ages that would lead the army out into the field of battle and possibly get killed. This was just a straight murder case. But Johnson is determined to turn it into the hands of the military. Now, why? Well, in answering that question, it's helpful to examine how different military culture is from civilian culture. One big difference is secrecy. Secrecy is everything in the military, and to a large extent, the whole national security establishment, along with this concept called national security. And everybody knows in the military or civilian contractors for the military that if you acquire classified information, you're going to keep that secret no matter what. You're going to even take it to the grave with you. Never reveal it. For example, if you go and talk to a Vietnam veteran today and say, hey, did you have access to classified information during the war? And if he says yes, and you say, what was it? He will say, can't talk about it, classified. What do you mean? It's 50, 60 years ago. What's the big deal? Can't talk about it, classified. And that's the mindset. He will not talk about it because it's inculcated as part of this military culture that you will never, ever reveal classified information. Recall the testimony of Sandra Spencer. Recall that she was the Navy petty officer that worked in the Navy photography lab there in D.C. She was the liaison between the Navy photography lab and the White House. She worked closely with President Kennedy. She testified directly and unequivocally before the Assassination Records Review Board in the 1990s that the autopsy photographs in the official record are not the ones she developed on the weekend of the assassination. She kept that secret for 30 years plus. Why? Because she had been told when she was developing her set of photographs, it was classified information. And sure enough, the entire autopsy on the very evening of the assassination was shrouded in national security and in classified information. Everybody was told, all the participants, this is classified. You will take it to the grave, but you will never reveal it. John Stringer, the photographer for the autopsy, he testified before the ARRB. They put the fear of God in us. And sure enough, they actually issued written letters of secrecy. That's what they were called, commanding and ordering everybody that participated, you will never reveal what you witnessed here. And sure enough, that those secrets were kept for many years. And people complied, of course, with the directive. They were threatened with court-martial or criminal prosecution if they'd already left the military. Now, the second distinguishing feature of the military is deference to authority. As everybody knows, there's a hierarchical order in the military. You got generals and colonels and majors and captains, all the way down the line. And everybody is expected to obey the orders of the person above them. This is inculcated, on the first day of boot camp or the first day of officer training school, that you will always follow the orders of those above you. Now, we saw this phenomenon during the autopsy. Recall when Colonel Fink was testifying at the Clay Shaw trial in New Orleans. He was asked, why didn't you dissect the neck? And finally they had to pull it out of him. He says, because I was ordered not to. Now, he claims not to have remembered the identity of the person that ordered him, but clearly it had to be a general. He was a colonel, had to be a general or an admiral, somebody in sufficient authority where Fink said, yes, sir. Even maybe a man in a suit, like a high CIA official. Regardless, Fink defers to authority because that's what he's been taught. Now, another example of this phenomenon, Stringer, who I mentioned earlier, the photographer, he was summoned to appear about 3 years after the autopsy before a committee whose purpose was to sign a written acknowledgement of an inventory of the photographs in the official record. And when Stringer saw the inventory, he knew it wasn't correct. A lot of the photographs he had taken were not in the inventory. And they said, sign it. And he says, well, it's not correct. And they said, sign it. And he went ahead and signed it. And he told this story to the Assassination Records Review Board, and one of the members there, staff members, said, well, why did you sign it if you knew it was wrong, if you knew it was false? And he said, because I was ordered to. And the staff member says, yeah, but some people say no in the military. And Stringer's response was, yeah, but they don't last very long. So that is the mindset. You defer to authority, you follow orders. Now, over the years, people have lamented the fact that the military had these inexperienced pathologists conducting this autopsy. And they were inexperienced. I mean, Humes and Boswell, they weren't even forensics pathologists. They were just regular pathologists, like dealing with tissues, is a tumor cancerous or benign, that type of thing. Forensics pathology is a very clear specialty. It deals with gunshot wounds, the cause of death, homicides, and so forth. Now, Fink was a forensics pathologist, but he was sort of odd man out anyway. They call him at the last minute. He arrives late after they'd already begun the autopsy. And anyway, he hadn't done a forensics autopsy for more than 2 years. And so people have lamented this. But you see, there's another way to look at this, that when you've got inexperienced pathologists, that's a dream come true for anybody that wants to exercise authority. Because if you're in command of a situation, you will be more likely to get deferred to if the person doesn't know what he's doing. So when you say, don't do this or don't do that, an inexperienced pathologist is not going to know any better. He's not going to know what his job is supposed to be, so he's more likely to say, yes, sir, and salute. So that's the culture of the military. Now, if you take Dr. Earl Rose, who, by the way, was one of the most renowned medical examiners in the country. Now, let's say he's performing the autopsy there at Parkland Hospital, and the president of the hospital comes down and says, don't dissect that neck. I guarantee you, Rose would have said, butt out. And if the president had said, I'm the president of this university and you're going to do as I say, Rose would have said, this is my domain, this is my autopsy, butt out and get out. Because it's an entirely different culture in civilian life. Now, so those two factors may very well have played an important role in Johnson's decision to turn the autopsy into the hands of the military. But, of course, the larger question still looms. Why was it so important to Johnson? Why was he so determined to get the autopsy on President Kennedy's body into the hands of the U.S. military?